Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Cub Live. This is where we talk about issues that are important to your utility bills. We're going to be covering a big issue today, and a really difficult issue is Illinois' summer of high prices. We have been getting a lot of calls from consumers concerned about how high their electric bills are this summer. We're going to dive into the reasons for that and what options consumers have. And this is a follow-up to a Cub Live that we had a few months ago, where we talked about the prices, that the price spike that was about to happen, or it was in early June, so it had just happened. Now that people are starting to get their bills, we thought it was a good idea to have our guests back on again, and we've got some great guests. These are veteran consumer advocates at Cub. We've got Ani Warnock, who is our bilingual consumer rights specialist. Ani, welcome, and thank you for being here today.
It's a pleasure. I'm so glad to see you guys again.
Yeah, it's great to see you. And Ani has been at Cub since 2006. She has done a lot of different key jobs for Cub, and the latest work that she's doing is she is spending all day or most of the day answering consumer questions and complaints about their utility bills, not just electric bills, but also gas bills. And Ani does amazing work. A year ago, she found that a business customer was paying way too much money for an alternative supplier. And I think, what was it? It was like a $20,000 refund you got for this consumer just through advocacy. So Ani has done great work, and we welcome here today. We also have Clara Summers, who is the manager of the Consumers for a Better Grid campaign. And Clara has been here since 2023, but before she came to Cub, she's been working on a lot of different advocacy issues. But Clara, I'm wondering, we're going to start off with you because we're going to talk about the root causes of this price spike. I'm wondering, first of all, can you tell us a little bit more about what Consumers for a Better Grid, what that campaign is all about?
Yeah, thanks. And I'm glad to be here, but I am sad for the circumstances.
Yes.
So a while back, Cub had the foresight to realize that there is so much excellent work that Cub can do at the state level to reduce bills and make our electricity and all of our utilities more affordable. But there are some things that are out of the state's control, and those are the way prices come through from our grid operators. And those are there are these entities that not a lot of people know about. You can think about it like in the Wizard of Oz, where they say, oh, like, pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. Most of the time, you don't have to pay attention to the man behind the curtain, and that's just our job. But in times like these, where we have really high prices, people start to wonder. And so Cub years ago started focusing particularly on the grid operator PJM, which serves the ComEd part of Illinois. And Ameren is served by the grid operator MISO. And these two grid operators are federally regulated, but the decisions they make affect the affordability, the reliability, and the cleanliness of our electricity. So Cub said, okay, since that's not state work, but it is work that affects ratepayers, so we are going to spend staff time advocating for ratepayers at those different grid operators. And so my work is to advocate on your behalf at PJM, and it's called the Consumers for a Better Grid campaign. So Consumers for a Better Grid is a watchdog holding grid operators accountable to consumers, states, and a clean, affordable energy future. And that's the brief intro. I can talk more about grid operators, but I think you have other questions too.
I know you could, and it's his fascinating topic, but that is great. You know, when I first came to Cub, well, just not too long ago, not even when I first came to Cub, but not too long ago, I didn't even know what PJM or MISO was. We are all, I think, this summer getting a crash course on what these entities are, because we are paying higher bills because of actions by PJM and MISO. So let's get into it. So just on a surface level, ComEd's price went up 45% on June 1st, their price for electricity. Ameren's went up about 50% on June 1st. And it's due to something that, again, this is another thing I didn't know even existed just a few years ago, something called capacity. So Clara, Sarah Moskowitz, our boss, she likes to say that customers are always surprised to hear that not only do we pay for the electricity on our electric bills, not only are we paying for the electricity that we actually use, we also pay for the electricity we may use in the future, which just makes customers shake their heads. But I understand that that's what capacity is. I'm wondering, can you explain a little bit more about what capacity is and how this is increasing our bills this summer?
Yeah, so capacity is thinking about how much electricity are we going to need in the long term. And it's a good idea to plan for it, because you don't want to get to a situation where there's so much demand for electricity that it outstrips supply. So what these grid operators do is they estimate into the future, okay, here's how much electricity we're going to need on the day that demand is highest. So we're going through a hot summer. So think of these days where it's really hot, everyone is running their AC, the demand for power is really high. That demand for power is not that high all the time. In fact, it's only a couple times a year that we actually hit that amount of demand. But the grid operators are still planning for, okay, if we do hit that demand, we need to have enough supply on the system, enough power generation on the system to meet that demand. And that is what buying capacity is it's essentially getting a lot of power generators. And so that can be gas plants, it can be nuclear, it can be wind farms, solar, any type of generating power resource. It's saying, okay, we're gonna give you extra payments to promise that you will be available on those days of really high demand. And right now, the projected demand is really, really high over the next couple of years, and it's outstripping the amount of supply that we have typically had. And so that means prices are going higher. The grid operators say we have to pay more money, and then you and I get stuck footing the bill.
So just so I understand this, this price for capacity is determined by auctions run by the power grid operators, which are PJM and MISO. PJM for Northern Illinois, MISO for Central and Southern Illinois. And that they have to come up, both of those entities come up with, I think they call it a load forecast, which is basically an estimate of how high the demand's going to get. And then they hold this auction to get power generators, not ComEd or Ameren, but these companies that sell electricity to ComEd and Ameren to agree to have that power ready if we need it in the future for that demand.
That's exactly right. So it is done by an auction. And the way this works is that basically the grid operator will stack up the bids they get from each power generator. And so this is a generator saying, okay, for this much electricity, I want to be paid this much.
Yeah.
And the grid operator will say, okay, this is the amount of demand we have to provide. We will take all of the bids that get us up to hitting this demand. And whatever the most costly resource was for getting that to that demand, that's the amount that we pay for everything, which is really confusing and technical. But essentially what it means is that the highest bidder sets the price for everyone.
Yeah.
And right now we're in a situation where the estimated demand is really high, and that's largely because of data centers, which we can talk about. But also the there aren't as many supply resources to respond to the high prices
Right.
and make bids that will bring the cost down, simply because these grid operators have been really slow to connect new generation to the grid. And so when they're slow to connect new, cheaper resources like wind or solar, then prices go higher.
Right. Right. So that's, oh, go ahead, Ani, please.
Well, one question that a lot of customers ask is, well, as you pointed out, in this case, it's the Federal Energy Regulatory Agency that regulates these grid operators. But the question is, up to what extent they are under the impression that they can intervene in the price setup, and I don't know if that's the case.
It's such a good question. Yeah, who are these grid operators accountable to?
Yeah, right.
It's a constant question. So FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, is like the Illinois Commerce Commission for the grid operators. It's the regulator, and it's true that the rules at these different grid operators have to be approved ultimately by FERC. But what's really important to know about these grid operators is who is making the rules. You can think of PJM and MISO, these grid operators, as kind of like Congress for the electric grid, where you have utilities, you have like power plant generation owners, you have transmission utilities. They're all designing the rules to regulate themselves and voting on those rules. The only folks who have a vote in that process who don't have a profit motivation are consumer advocates.
Yeah.
And there are 14 of us in PJM, one for each jurisdiction. It's 13 states and DC. And so it's us plus all of these profit motivated interests voting on the rules to regulate themselves. So by the time something gets to FERC, yeah, FERC can say yes or no. And often they approve something, then we'll request rehearing. We're also advocating for you at FERC. But it's really important to fix what's happening at these grid operators in the first place, because it's kind of a fox guarding the henhouse situation. If you're making the rules for the game that you're playing, you're probably going to win, which means the prices are going to be higher to benefit the folks who make money off of them.
And probably, so in other words, like the grid operators are following the regulations, which is to have this auction. Therefore, the FERCs as well. That's the process to determine the prices. So therefore, we don't have a say in that because you're following the process, right? Something like that.
They will approve. Like sometimes they'll say the process is right or wrong. And one thing I will say, so in the last year, the prices that hit on June 1st, those were set in stone last year in July when the auction was run. So we had a heads up that these prices were going to come. And in the meantime, many advocates identified problems with those auction rules that led to artificially high prices. One is this interconnection queue delay, which you can think of as this is the line of new power plants wanting to connect to the grid. And it's been super delayed, especially in PJM, for years. And in fact, right now it's frozen. No new applications can be submitted. So that leads to artificially high prices. There were also a couple circumstances of certain types of power plants or generation not being reflected as supply, not being reflected in the auction, not being required to participate in the auction. And so after that happened, advocates said, hey, that's a problem. And we were able to get that changed. And also, another big factor between last year and this year is that Governor Shapiro in Pennsylvania made an agreement with PJM to lower the maximum price cap, because recognizing that, if the interconnection queue is frozen, if you can't get new supply online to reduce prices, then you are going to have artificially high prices. That means we need to have a lower price cap. So though there were some changes, and FERC agreed with those changes. That's good. They're not long term, and there are still a lot of other things that need to be changed. And we're seeing the results of that now, where there was another auction, and we expect prices will increase again next year.
So prices are going to be elevated again next summer. That's the bad news. Really frustrating. So to Ani's point, FERC could, at times, FERC in certain circumstances can order refunds if they find there's market manipulation, there's any type of shenanigans going on, right? That doesn't often happen though, correct?
That's
right.
Correct.
Right. So what we're trying to do is, we've said this for years, is even when the rules are working as they should, like you talk about the power grid operators, you read their news releases after these capacity auctions, and correct me if I'm wrong, but they sounded somewhat positive about it, like, hey, the system's working as it should. And that, I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about that, like what exactly needs to change at these power grid operators, because the system wasn't working when consumers are paying these high bills.
Yeah. I think there is a fundamental disconnect between what everyday people are experiencing and the people at these power grid operators, because it's true. PJM, after the previous auction last year, they said, yeah, this is happening because supply is shrinking and demand is high. And that is not the case. If they have broken the interconnection queue so we can't get new supply online, then yeah, it's going to cause prices to go up, but that's not a natural part of the market.
Right.
And if also we have this case of high demand with a lot of data centers coming online, and that's unusual. If it weren't for the data center demand, frankly, we would be balanced.
Yeah.
But there were also several problems, which again, since last year, when they first came out with their press release saying, oh yes, like this is just supply and demand fundamentals, have identified major flaws in the way PJM ran the market. And for example, in Maryland, consumers were paying extra money to keep old, decrepit coal plants operating.
And not only decrepit, expensive.
Yes, expensive, super expensive, to keep them operating. And so consumers were paying for those to keep those plants operating, but PJM said, we're going to pretend like those plants don't exist. So even though they were operating, they're saying, oh, they're not real supply.
Right.
That fortunately has been fixed for the next 2 auctions, which we just had one of them. So we have one more auction where that will be fixed for, but we need a long-term fix for that. It's not as simple when they say, oh, supply and demand, this is just how it goes. It's really a lack of reflection on what led to these high prices. And frankly, these grid operators could be doing a lot more to reform their markets and make them more transparent and affordable for ratepayers.
Yeah, we cannot understate or overstate, excuse me, the importance of that interconnection queue, that stalling. Sometimes they wait, the average wait time, I think, was like over 5 years. This is a lot of power that's waiting in line to be connected to the grid, potential power that could help bring down prices and take care of this. So this is, let me just say a little bit more about central and southern Illinois, because it's similar, but it's slightly different, as MISO runs the Mid-Continent Independent System Operator, or MISO, runs the auction down in central and southern Illinois. And by the way, this is not just Illinois. Both of these power grid operators are huge. Huge swath of land, of a region, going all the way for PJM to the East Coast. For MISO, it goes from Canada all the way down to Louisiana. So it's a huge area that they're controlling this grid. That is not an easy job to do. We have seen the power grid operators make some advances, but it's not enough. There's still, so for example, with MISO, again, it's not quite as bad as in PJM, but we still have resources that are waiting. And most of this is wind, solar, and battery projects that are waiting in line that could help bring down prices, that they wait years. It's not as long as with PJM, but it's years in MISO also. But also the MISO introduced a new pricing model, and it's called the Reliability-Based Demand Curve, RBDC. And we argue that just unacceptably compromised affordability for consumers. Again, it's this whole idea of, hey, this new pricing model, this new way of pricing capacity at this auction worked the way they wanted it to work, and it still led to this huge increase for Ameren customers. So a lot that needs to be done. I'm wondering, Clara, can you tell us, so where does capacity show up on electric bills? Is there a capacity line item?
If only it were that obvious. No. So on your bill, there's a supply line, and all the costs from what we call the wholesale market shows up in supply. These are the costs from the grid operators. So that's transmission lines, that's the day-to-day cost of electricity, that's what's called the energy market, and then the capacity market. So it's all bundled into that supply line, and it gets passed down directly to you. Like ComEd and Ameren don't make a profit off of it, they just pass it on in that line. So if you notice your bill going up, like in conversations like this, you can know, oh, that's at least partially due to the capacity market, but it won't be made obvious on your bill.
Right.
Unless you're a participant of the hourly pricing. If your utility offers that, then you'll have a separate line item, and then you'll be surprised because right now, unfortunately, it's really high.
It's high, and thank you for bringing that up, Ani. The lion's share customers have traditional pricing, and they're not going to see that capacity line item, but they will see that increase in their supply price. But hourly pricing customers up in Northern Illinois and in Central and Southern Illinois, Power Smart pricing customers will see that reflected in a separate line item. So, Ani, now I'm going to put you on the hot seat, and thank you, Clara. Please jump in at any point. The only other thing I'll say is that we, over the years, looking at these power grid operators, we have often said that, in the halls of CUB, that they tend to take a no power generator left behind approach to pricing capacity, which is prioritizing these big payouts to these big power generators. Again, the power plant owners that sell electricity to ComEd and Ameren, and to the detriment of consumers. But Ani, let's go over what's been happening this summer. So I said it earlier, about a 50% increase in ComEd and Ameren's price. So it's about 10 cents per kilowatt hour for ComEd this summer, which when you're paying for gasoline, maybe 10 cents per kilowatt hour, it doesn't seem that big, but that's actually about a 50% increase from what it was last summer. For Ameren, it's about 12.18 cents per kilowatt hour. Again, about a 50% increase. ComEd said at the beginning of all this, when we held news conferences to warn consumers, they said it's going to be about a 10 to 15% increase in bills, about $10.60 a month on average over the next 12 months. Ameren said 18 to 22%, or about $38 to $46 per month through September. The one important thing about Ameren, I cannot say this enough, is that Ameren expects its electricity price to go down to around 8 to 9 cents per kilowatt hour on October 1st. They're estimating that. They've said that publicly several times. So just know that the price is now it's over 12 cents per kilowatt hour, which is horrible. It's going to go down. They're expecting it to go down to 8 to 9 cents per kilowatt hour in October. Obviously, we'll talk more about that. But so people are thinking, okay, I'm ready for this. Suddenly they get bills. The Chicago Tribune reports $10.60 a month. Not really. That's not what I'm seeing on my electric bill. People were reporting to ComEd that that they were seeing triple-digit increases. The ComEd actually came out and said actually the jump from May to June was about $67, not $10.60. So have you been experiencing these customers calling in saying, what the heck's going on?
Definitely. So we've had customers from Ameren territory and ComEd complain about high bills. And for the most part, well, I shouldn't say for the most part, but a lot of them are just observing the peak prices for the summer. And also they're using, this is the peak season, July, August, when you're using more energy for cooling. And so we didn't get as many complaints like in the month of June, because that's really reflecting when you get that initial bill, you're getting basically the last spring bill, and you're not going to experience a lot of usage. And also, even if the new price kicked in, because the usage is moderate, you're not going to see that high cost on your energy bill. So it's more so now that, your July, August usage is kicking in and topping that, the new prices, then that's when we're starting to get the calls.
Great. So great point. A double whammy going on here. Not only did you see a price spike, but we have hot summer weather. People are using more. But on top of that, we had these heat waves. We had at least 2 instances where heat just went through the roof. And also, again, we're going to be dealing with that this weekend. I believe Saturday is there are heat indices that are going to go up near 100. So that's just the last thing, we need. But that's what I've heard, is that it wasn't just the price spike, but also it was the heat waves, the extreme heat that we got hit with. So, Ani, what do you like? What kind of conversations are you having with customers? What options do they have?
Right. So the first is trying to understand, right, what's going on. Because a lot of customers are under the impression this was a rate hike, where like this price was approved somehow, and now they're stuck with it. So it's first trying to understand that it wasn't really like a price that was determined through the regulatory process, like at the state level, but that this is a wholesale market price, and this has to do with the different type of industry, which is the generation side of things, not the delivery side of things. Right. So that's what increased. And then also comparing the prices. So a lot of people just see the overall cost of your service, but you don't necessarily break it down. Like, how much are you paying per kilowatt hour? What is your supply cost versus like your overall bill? So understanding that too. And then the other point is, well, what are you comparing your bill with? You're saying, okay, it's high or higher, but higher than what? Higher than your previous bill, which, was a spring bill. So yes, you are going to see a higher bill. Or are you comparing it to last year for the same period? Then again, yes, it's going to be higher, because last year you were not paying, for ComEd customers, you were not paying 10 cents a kilowatt hour. You were paying closer to 6. For Ameren customers, you were not paying 12 cents a kilowatt hour. You were paying closer to 5 or 6. So yes, you are going to see a difference. But if it's like significantly much more, than other than that difference in the price, then we look at the usage. Well, are you being consistent with the way that you're consuming energy? Sure. Or this year, have you consumed significantly more that then it's a combination of price and then using more energy?
Yeah. Are there some tips that you give consumers on what they can do to try to deal with this? Somebody calls up saying, I'm really struggling with my bills. What, what do you tell them?
So the first thing is if they're struggling because they're trying to reduce the energy usage, and if that's the case, if there's something that they want to implement, then I would recommend the energy efficiency tips, and also the programs that, although they're very basic, but still they can help, just because they can install a programmable thermostat. They can, through the program, you can receive power smart strips, and that can help. It's not going to reduce your energy like 50%, 60%, like
Yes.
super noticeable, but it's something, a little here, a little there. Now, if they're looking for economic, like financial assistance, depending on the time of the year, summer is really tough, because that is usually when most of the programs have already ran out of funds. And it's difficult, to find a specific organization that we could just say, yes, this organization has available funding, you can apply there. So it's difficult when it comes to the financial assistance in the summer. But other than that, like in another season, there is the state government funding, the federal funding as well for energy assistance. And there are different organizations that are able to administrate those programs. Sometimes the utility companies have their own funding. ComEd had one this summer, but the funds already ran out. And then currently they have a program that is a supplementary arrears program, where the company can help you diminish your balance, but it's for selective customers. But still, I always encourage them to call. You never know if you qualify.
Yeah. Boy, that 10 million, they had a 10 million, ComEd had a $10 million fund. It was through shareholder funds, which was good. That was a good step in the right direction. But boy, that money went away in, it seemed like weeks it was, and that money was used up, which just is so sad and shows the need out there. We call on both. Ameren just emailed me this morning and said Ameren, Illinois and Ameren, Missouri are offering about $4 million in assistance. So one of the things we always try to tell people is, if you're struggling, keep that line of communication open with the utility companies. Call up your utility, find out about efficiency programs, find out if there are any sources of assistance that there can, that you can take advantage of. Unfortunately, it's just always not enough money. But of course, practicing energy efficiency can help soften the blow, but it's not going to take it away. But we have said publicly, we put out news releases at the beginning of the summer, ComEd and Ameren should be giving more money to more shareholder funds to give assistance to consumers. That 10 million went too quickly. And I think this is a time for ComEd and Ameren not only to give more money for assistance, but also to work with customers to keep them connected. You can call the company if you're struggling and see if you can develop some type of, if there's other payment options available, or like a payment plan. Is that correct, Donnie?
I was going to suggest that it's amazing how a lot of people are not aware that you're entitled as a customer to request for a payment arrangement. So I would say, especially at the beginning stages, if you're struggling with one bill, that's much more manageable than if you're at the point where it's like several months of past due balances, and it's much harder to really commit to a payment arrangement with a larger amount of money that you owe than if you have something smaller. But that is a way, you have that right as a customer to request a payment arrangement, to make your payments in installments. So that way you don't have to commit to paying everything all at once.
Right. Yeah. And so you mentioned earlier about some of the calls you get. People are like, well, I'm assuming that ComEd got some type of rate hike. I'm glad you brought that up. that when we talk about, Clara mentioned before that, this is capacity cost. This is one component of the cost of supply. ComEd and Ameren don't make money off of supply. They're supposed to pass those costs on to customers with no markup. However, CUB has a long history of fighting ComEd and Ameren on the other part of the bill, the delivery part of the bill, which they're often fighting for rate hikes. They just got a rate hike last year, and that's on the delivery side of the bill. And they do profit off that part of the bill. So we're constantly fighting them to bring down, to lower the amount of profit. Often they're going for too high a profit rate and all those issues, all the wasteful spending. And that's why we say, hey, Ameren and ComEd, it's time to be a good corporate citizen, not only give more shareholder funding to help bring down bills for customers who are suffering, but also do everything you can. Like Ani said, when a customer calls up, is struggling, wants to stay connected, is trying to come up, work with that customer to come up with a plan. And the only other thing I'd say too is just with energy efficiency is it's always about, this is the thing that keeps me tossing and turning at night, is if people are going to be so worried about their electric bills that they're going to keep their home at an unsafe temperature, they're going to try to save money by keeping that thermostat way too high in this hot summer weather. And I'd say that energy efficiency is always about reducing energy waste. It's never about being unsafe. And so everybody, just hoping everybody looks out for one another and makes sure that everybody is staying safe. And thank you, Elizabeth. Elizabeth Brandon is behind the scenes today, putting a lot of helpful information in the chat. Clara has written a bunch of things, Q&As about the last capacity auction and how it's increasing bills this summer, or the previous capacity auction, how it's increasing bills this summer, and the new capacity auction, how that will increase bills next summer. So please, stay educated about this. You can go to cubhelpcenter.com. We've got a lot of resources there about why this is happening and how to, options you can do. That's the kind of thing that Ani was talking about. One thing, Ani, I'm wondering if we can talk about, this is another thing that keeps me tossing and turning at night, is you get a knock on the door and somebody says, did you read those headlines about the supply price going through the roof? Mm-hmm. I got a great deal for you. Can I take a look at your bill? What do you tell people about alternative suppliers in this environment?
Yes, so that's a popular topic on our hotline because customers are looking for an alternative to their utility company, thinking that they can escape the so-called rate hike. But again, in this particular case, it was not a rate hike. So this is not something that the utility companies established or settled. And you always want to compare prices. So right now we're talking about electric supply. Right. Electric supply, you should know what your price is per kilowatt hour before you accept another deal. So that way you can compare prices. That's the key to everything. So it doesn't matter if someone is approaching you and saying that they can guarantee savings, that you're definitely going to save. And this also goes with solar deals, because that's also another pitch that customers have been asking about, that it's a way to guarantee savings, but you should always compare your price to know if you're really going to save. You will be able to determine that just by doing that.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up about, we just put out about alternative suppliers. We just put out a blog about this. We're going to be putting out a news release next week, is that we've run the numbers now. The state of Illinois does a report every year. Illinois consumers have lost more than $2 billion to alternative electricity suppliers over the last 10 years, since 2015. It's just, we call it a grim new milestone. So just be very careful. A lot of people are interested in seeing what their choices are, and there's nothing wrong with that, but just be very careful. And you also mentioned solar, is that we're big supporters of solar, but we're also big supporters of people being educated about their options. And a lot of times you will see some questionable firms going door to door and really giving consumers a tough, high pressure sales pitch. And if you ever have a question about any of that, first of all, never give out your electric bill at your doorstep. You can always get information from that group, and you can always give Cub a call at 1-800-669-5556 if you ever have a question about an alternative supplier or even a solar power deal that's pitched to you at your doorstep. We right now are involved in a program called Switch Together, which is is the opposite of a high pressure sales pitch. It's an education program about solar power, but it's also gives you a chance to get involved in a program that can get you lower installation costs for solar. It's a safe way to explore solar, and as we said before, solar power is a great deal for consumers. Just if you're getting a high pressure sales pitch at your door, just be very careful, be very wary, and you can always call Cub if you have questions about that.
And also to keep in mind that nowadays a lot of the contracts are done just with verbal authorization. So long gone are those days where you have actual paper that you sign. And so you have to be very careful with your personal information, which appears on your utility bill, but also be very careful to how you respond to some of these questions, because for all you know, you could be authorizing the company to switch you or to agree to a contract, and you're thinking you're just obtaining information or you're just answering some random questions. So be mindful of that as well.
I am so glad you said that. How many people have we talked to who say, you know what, I had no idea I was with an alternative supplier until my bill went through the roof. So there are so many sad stories. Just this year, Ani, your consumer advocacy team worked with the outreach team and got a person about $1,000 refund. They had been signed up with an alternative electricity supplier, and it was just an awful deal. And so thank you for all the work you're doing. And Clara, thank you for all the work you're doing. Again, if you have questions about the price spike this summer, you can go to cubhelpcenter.com. Help me out here if I've forgotten anything that we need to talk about.
Those were the key points, and I think they're the very popular questions that we're getting right now. We also offer utility and bill analysis,
Yes.
and I know it's like very sometimes confusing to look at your electric bill. But that's something that we can help you, and that's it's amazing. Like once you understand that breakdown, you have peace of mind, because then like, oh, I see what's happening here, and okay, I don't like it because I don't have a recourse. I have to pay this high bill, but at least now I understand how this bill is got to this point, or how the cost, the breakdown of all of the cost components.
Yeah, that's great, and I'm glad you brought that up, because that's the other thing. A lot of consumers are feeling helpless this summer, but we got Clara doing great work at PJM. They're to reform PJM. We're working on reforming, bringing reforms to the power grid operator. We're also working on a state level to bring reforms. Ani, you mentioned alternative supplier problems. Brian McDaniel, our fighter in Springfield, is working for a bill that will protect, better protect customers from alternative supplier scams. We're also working for a bill called the Clean and Reliable Grid Affordability Act, which would, among many different reforms, would open the door to bringing more battery storage to the grid, which again is a cost-effective way to help bring down electricity prices. So we're working for long-term reforms. And on a daily basis, I think Cubs were also working to just help consumers get through this summer. So please visit cubhelpcenter.com. If you have questions about PJM and the power grid and what we're doing to fight for justice there for consumers, go to forabettergrid.org. I did get that right, forabettergrid.org. And
that's right.
There is 2 great videos at the bottom, and Elizabeth put one of them in the chat. There's PJM 101. It is a great use of your time to educate you in a very consumer-friendly way to learn more about PJM. And there's also just a short video talking about how important these power grid issues are. And we're all seeing this now because we're paying these higher electricity prices. So for long-term, we're working for long-term reforms, and we got a great group with the Consumer Advocacy Department like Ani working for just to help consumers get through this summer. So I appreciate you two. I know you're busy. You got to get back to working for consumers, but I appreciate you giving me time today to just talk about this important issue.
Thank you, Jim. Really glad to be here. And as Jim said, if you would like to dive more into the nitty-gritty details about our grid operators, check out forabettergrid.org. And CUB will keep fighting for you at all of these different levels, whether it's the actual, like the one-on-one support that Ani and others do, to the work that's happening in Springfield, to the work that's happening at the Illinois Commerce Commission on rates, to PJM and FERC. We're trying to work for you.
I'm glad we were able to do this. I hope it was informational and useful for a lot of customers, because it is a complicated topic, very technical. And, you know, you don't want to overwhelm people with too much technicality, or, you know, also I feel like, especially when customers are asking these questions over the phone, I don't want to feel like I'm passing on the problem to someone else, you know, like, oh, this is not, you know, something that we have any control over, you know. And so it's a difficult thing, but one thing that makes me optimistic is that change can happen, and customers can feel empowered by reaching out to their elected officials in Congress, because ultimately they make the regulations. And, you know, even if the change is not going to happen immediately, just, you know, doing your part as writing a letter or making a phone call, you did something about it.
That's right.
And that's important. So, and as you see, like, that was really uplifting, that example you gave of the congressman or senator, I don't remember, from Pennsylvania that you mentioned earlier. That was
Governor Shapiro.
Governor Shapiro, right.
So that just shows, you know, that with good leadership, you can, you know, move towards the right direction. And so that's another way for customers to be able to voice, you know, their situation, their experience, their concerns, because that's what our elected officials were hired to do. In addition to reaching out to FERC, you know, because if a lot of people are able to express how this is impacting them, I think that then the agencies that can do something about it will be more motivated.
That's right, Ani. Great point. If you're struggling with those bills, call up your elected officials, both on the state and the federal level. Let them know that this is an issue that is important to you. And also, you can go to cubactioncenter.com. We've got a lot of petitions for people to sign about a number of issues. Amid all these high electric bills, Nicor Gas and Ameren are asking for big rate hikes. So cubactioncenter.com. And also, as Ani said, call up your elected officials. We'll work with anybody on any side of the aisle to advocate for consumers. So, all right. Well, thank you so much, both of you. I wish you all a good day, and everybody, just please stay safe this summer. And if you have a question, concern, or a complaint about your utility service, and you've tried the utility and you're getting nowhere with them, give CUB's hotline a call. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a great day.